on effect. Okay, this is what we're going to be covering. These are the bullets for our objectives that were in the promotional brochure for the seminar. And there are several progress measures, progress indicators in the next generation science standards that went into creating these objectives. And the keywords here in the first bullet, the keywords to me are basic needs for humans and other animals. In the second bullet, the fact that plants also have various needs in order to survive, and we'll be exploring a little bit about how those needs are met, or actually we'll be exploring ways to introduce those to your students. We're also going to get into comparing animals and plants and how we're built and how we use these external parts in order to meet our basic needs, which lends to our survival and our growth. And lastly, there's an activity that can be done outdoors where kids will be investigating the living things, plants and animals that live very close to the schoolyard, and then how to compare two locations that are near your school. So we have a lot of content to cover, and I just wanted to say that this beautiful day, first of all, I'm sorry that most of you are probably inside. You'd rather be outside, but this is the perfect time of year to talk about ecology, because we are going to be talking about growth and new life and renewed life, and it's a perfect time for that. All right, I want to share two quotes with you that are important in my work. The one on the left is from the environmental perspective, and what we'll cover today are actually, imagine two trains meeting on the same track. We're combining formal education about science education, with education about the environment. And the book on the left that this is from, The Natural Learning, The Life History of an Environmental Schoolyard, this focuses on focuses on the curiosity and wonder that lower elementary students have, and pretty much capitalizing on that, and how nature study and outdoor and indoor science education that's hands-on really taps into a young person's curiosity, natural creativity, natural need to investigate more, and what's that, and what's this, and why is this doing that, and so on. And if we flip it over onto the other quote, that one is from an educational perspective, someone who works with kids, and focuses more on the skills that need to be taught in science education, but in so doing focuses on nature, and through nature the kids are going to emphasize the skills that have to be taught, but they recognize that nature has a way of pulling those skills out of kids because they do want to get involved with natural surroundings. Place-based education is a term, it's a method of teaching that's been around for several years, several decades actually. This description of place-based education came from a book called Place-Based Education by Dave Sobel, who is an education leader and an author and a professor. And it's a process of using your immediate surroundings, what's around you. And place-based education includes the actual classroom, which everyone's used to using. It includes the actual building, which is always beyond your classroom, but maybe less familiar to you to use as part of your program. And then it uses the outdoor community at large, which is immediately when you leave the back door and go out onto the school property. And in that world, outdoors as well as in the building, there's ample opportunities to talk about science and to cover what needs to be covered in the next gen science standards, as well as integrate other subject areas. We know from research, we know from several studies that have been going on for years in our resource lists, for this webinar will include places you can go to see collections of research in this. But we do know that when the natural environment or the immediate surroundings are used, we are emphasizing real-world, hands-on experiences that are occurring at the same time that life is going on, where the kids are living and breathing. This can increase academic achievement. There are several studies that have shown that kids who participate in environment-based instruction, their testing abilities are better, their scores are better. It also has shown to reduce absenteeism because the kids are interested in coming to school and seeing what's going to happen next in this particular type of approach. And it also helps improve their social skills because there's many opportunities to work with partners and with groups. And because they're all focused on something that's of interest to everyone, there's less disciplinary problems, and their social skills, their ability to interact with other kids and work together are strengthened. We also know that this kind of place-based education helps develop ties with the community at large. I wanted to just ask you, how many times, I notice this as I get older, how many times do you drive by a new construction site, and when I see something being put up, I always wonder, what was there? I drive by that, and it happens to me all the time. It happens to me when I go back to where I grew up, and I really notice changes over time. And what place-based education does, it helps us all to focus on things that we walk by every day, we drive by every day. And that's the magic of it. And that leads to enhancing a person's awareness of the natural world, the natural surroundings. What we hope to build, what we know we're building by involving students in place-based education is a heightened commitment to becoming an active citizen. They will, by being engaged in the natural surroundings that they go to school in, that they go home in, that are at their fingertips, kids are more inclined to get involved. When you talk about solving problems, when you talk about critical thinking, they're studying processes and concepts that are at their fingertips and very real to them. David Sobel also says in his book, Place-Based Education, this is a practice that many of us that do environment-based instruction believe in, and the Next Generation Science Standards emphasizes that we start with the more simple concepts, the basic building blocks, and use them to build into more complex, more sophisticated ideas, concepts, systems, and so on as kids get older. Similar, I've heard many teachers use the idea that you teach kids how to write. They learn the alphabet, then they learn words, then they learn basic sentences, and then they learn how to write constructively or creatively. So it gets more complicated as they get older. And the same thing happens in nature, and teaching about ecology and the natural environment. That you have to start with the simple, and as kids get older, if they have those basic building blocks, they're going to have a better understanding of the more complicated issues. In this diagram, that's something that we tried to emphasize, and the Center for Eco-Literacy also has a statement here that if this type of instruction is cultivated in the classroom, it helps students mature into citizens who have an ecological literacy, and they can lead more purposeful lives when it comes to protecting the environment or living sustainably. So if you look from left to right, you have a student, one person, and how the whole emphasis here is on transportation, movement. So within the world of what that student can do, that young person, he or she gets around on a bicycle. That's in their control, and it's very simple. I want to get from point A to point B. And then as they get older, they have other options for travel. They're allowed to go further, and their world gets bigger. They take a bus to school. They may take a public mass transit to school. They have different options, but their world gets bigger. They go to many places, not just point A to point B. They're traveling with other people. Eventually, they purchase a car. They get, they have a family vehicle, and they get their own vehicle. And then finally, the most complicated of all this is the transportation systems that we put in place for everyone to do their own traveling, so that people are going to various places. If you think about every environmental issue that we struggle with, we grapple with every day, everything can be broken down to very simplistic, basic building blocks. And they're usually based on what a human being needs. Not always, but often based on human needs and human activities that we do every day. Okay, this is the actual introduction to the elementary standards K-5, which is what we're covering, some of those indicated in this section. And I bolded some of the key words in here that we will be touching on. We will, students begin to recognize patterns. They begin to formulate answers to questions about the world around them, and we're definitely going to begin getting into that with this seminar. The world around us being what's in the classroom, but most importantly, what's outside the classroom, in that world that they travel through every day to come in and out of school. The kids are going to be doing a lot of gathering, describing, and using information about the natural world as well as the design world. And last but not least, it says that, why is this important in the lower grades? Because these performance expectations for the elementary grades develop ideas and skills that allow students to explain more complex phenomenon in the 4 disciplines as they progress to middle school and high school. And around the country, hundreds of environmental professionals like myself were pleased to be helped to shape the next generation science standards, primarily because this is the kind of language that we were pleased to see. Now, these are the actual performance measures that this seminar is supporting. And these were also covered in the objectives that we went through a little earlier. And these will be posted online when the seminar is posted. But what I really love that's contained in the Next Gen Science Standards are what they call cross-cutting concepts. And we will be emphasizing these 4 today in the 3 sets of activities that we're going to be going through. Patterns, structures, and functions, cause and effect, and systems. All in the world of ecology, these are very important. I love to start a program like this by talking about not me, but us. I want you to think about you, and I'll think about me. Each of us are either probably sitting indoors, but maybe outside. Hopefully some of you are sitting in the sun. But right now, if you're sitting in the sun, you're enjoying that form of energy on you. You're probably indoors, using electricity. Every time I'm inhaling to talk to you, I'm taking in oxygen. And every time I exhale, I'm giving off carbon dioxide. And every time I exhale, I'm giving off tiny particulates of water that are entering into the air around me. I have clothes on that were made primarily with natural materials like cotton, natural resources. The laptop that I'm using is on a table that's made of wood, which is a natural resource. I made sure to use the restroom before I started the seminar, and in order to do that, I had to turn on the faucet, which required clean drinking water. And when I flushed, I created water that left this building and went into a wastewater treatment facility. When I leave this system, when I leave this place, I'm going to get into my car and I'm going to travel. All of these things, every one of our daily activities, no matter where we're located, puts us on common ground. I love using this slide because the minute we're born and independent of our parents, we become very dependent on the planet. And I have to say that the only time they really emphasize this quite honestly and openly in the Next Gen Standards is in kindergarten. That we have basic needs, and our basic needs all require the planet. So that's why I like to start with us, because I don't want people to forget how crucial these basic needs are to each of us. And that in order to attain those, we definitely have an impact on the planet every day that we live. This is an activity that, this is a chart that was created for Project WILD, which is a curriculum supplement that DEP sponsors. You can do this activity in your classroom by just having your kids divide up in groups. This lesson in Project WILD is called Beautiful Basics. And if you divide the class into 3 groups, you have 1 group for people, 1 group for pets, and 1 group for wildlife. And you have the kids brainstorm in their group, what do these critters all in their group need in order to survive? What do we need? And talk about survival first. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, you know, the old idea, you're on an island, what is it you need in order to live? And then ask them, you know, beyond that time, what else is needed? Because kids, every time I've done this with kids, they come up with other things that, as humans, we know aren't needed for survival, but we know it's important to the kids, so they will think of these things. When they are finished with their list, and you can work with them in discussion to make sure they're pretty complete, you should find that people, pets, and wildlife pretty much have the same basic needs. So there's not much difference between any of us. And the amazing thing is that where we live as humans is where wildlife lives. And they are going about in their independent way meeting those basic needs. And we as people are meeting those basic needs for the pets that we have. And you could discuss with the kids the difference between a pet or a domestic animal and what is wildlife. We have to go about meeting their basic needs on their own, independent from getting any kind of help. We're now going to try something interactive here. There are 2 humans here, and this is representing a model that you can do with your kids. So we're going to ask you out there if you could type in what are basic needs that humans have, and you can also come up with things that may be convenient, things that you know you need in order to maintain your family well. So if folks could type in things, if we don't see anything popping in, we're just gonna we have things hidden in the screen, and we'll just start exposing them unless you want to help us out. So Mark Rogoff is helping me here. So we know that everybody needs food. And when you think about food, you also think that with that comes soil. I've often gone into classrooms and asked kids to, usually their favorite food is pizza. And there isn't one item in pizza that can't be produced without soil, without water, without land. So everything taps into our natural resources. Everybody needs clothes. We need, the balloons are actually representing air. We need open space. We need space to meet our needs so we're not overcrowded. We also need water, shelter. Okay. What we're actually creating is something, it's a very simple model where we have the species in the middle because it's all about them. And this is everything that they need in order to have their basic needs met. So you have warmth, transportation, shelter, food, community, other people. We also have family, which is what students often request, often mention, parents. Loving families actually has been a common thing. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to see from kids and what is important to them. What you can do is just take that model and now assign them to a form of wildlife. And we encourage you to pick a form of wildlife that lives in your neighborhood. So we have a red fox here. And I would encourage when you do this lesson to have ahead of time have animals of various types that you can assign to the kids, or better yet, you write them up on index cards or pieces of paper, put them in a hat, and have them select them. So it's a random selection. But you want to make sure that you include in that grouping 2 or 3 species of birds, insects, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and fish, and so on. We did get a question from someone listening about what arrangement means. Well, just in a slide or two, we'll get into the term habitat. But a habitat is where any place, that is any particular place where a species can thrive. When it thrives, it means that its basic needs are all in what they call suitable arrangement. When you think about that, think about any species in New Jersey that are common to us: deer, black bear, fox, songbirds of different types. They're thriving in an area. Sometimes their populations are very healthy because all of their needs are met in suitable arrangement. Now, if you have too many deer in one place and they're competing, or if you have too many predators in one place and there's not enough food for them, that arrangement, what's in that habitat for them is no longer suitable. And then some kind of change will need to happen for that animal, whether their population is reduced or they move to a different location, and so on. I hope that answers the question. But what you would do is have the kids, you would just give them a blank sheet of paper, a photograph or a drawing of their animal that's in the middle, and you have them do the research to find information out about the basic needs. And everything on that huge piece of paper becomes its habitat. What kind of community is that animal usually found in? And that's what you would be having them research. Habitat is usually, for any wild animal, that's where they have homes or shelters. That's where they sleep. That's where they have their families. Unlike what we spend a lot of time in our homes, but it's good to talk to the kids about the fact that animals have shelters where they sleep or are protected, but then they spend a lot of time outside. They have to forage or look for their food. They have to walk sometimes quite far to get water, or they have to fly to get water. So their travels are sometimes a lot more intense than what we need to do. And unlike where we have everything in our house, like water and food, and all of our needs are met in our house, they often are outside in order to meet their needs. They live differently than we do. When you have this activity finished, what you would do is have the kids get into a circle and have their information, their critter with their paper in front of them as they sat in the circle. And then you would talk about are there relationships and commonalities or patterns, which is one of our cross-cutting themes, between any of the animals that you have. You will have 2 to 3 kids that have insects. You will have 2 to 3 kids that have birds. You may want to have them talk and meet together with other birds and other insects so that they can talk about what they have in common. They could learn and discuss what they have differently, what they have that are different between their species. We will find that just among insects, they're built differently, they live differently, they eat different things, their lifespans are different. They need different places to have families. And they are maybe alive or are dormant during parts of the year, or they have very short lives. So those differences are what these activities are supposed to focus on, as well as what they have in common. And the things that kids start paying attention to are also the body shape, coloration, the size of these animals, and so on. When you put them together in a circle, you have mammals, insects, birds, amphibians, reptiles together. You can begin to talk about how they relate to each other. They all have basic needs. They all need water. They all need shelter. Sometimes they eat each other. Sometimes they eat plants. Sometimes they eat both. Sometimes they live in the same habitat. Sometimes they don't. So it begins indoors. You begin to focus on learning about the critters that can live outside of that school, that can live in that community. And kids, this is part of place-based instruction, although the kids haven't left and gone outdoors yet. This is a variety of things that are the kind of things that you would focus on when the kids are focusing on another animal. Some of these things I already mentioned: mouth, the mouth shape, the body parts, legs and feet, looking at their mouths when they're exploring this other animal, like if we were looking at that fox. You know, the shape and size, its coloration, what kind of sounds does it make, or noises? Why is it making that noise? Movements, motions. How does it defend itself? How does it attack something else if it's eating it? Seasonal changes. What happens in the winter to that particular animal? What goes on with its, what kind of patterns does it have in the spring? And evidence. You know, usually kids are often excited to see these animals when you go outside. Chances are you see less animals because it's usually a group and they're noisy. But there are techniques that you can do to try and see living creatures, but oftentimes encourage them to be like detectives and to look for evidence of the animals having been there. And there are many, many signs of animal activity that kids walk by every day. And part of the neat things about doing activities like this is getting them excited about things that they can step over when they're on their way to the bus stop every day. So doing these types of indoor activities, focusing on these critters when the kids are in a circle, these are laying the groundwork for students to learn more about diversity of species, which is something in the Next Gen standards that are covered later. But this is laying the groundwork for that. There's also another term that they would be introduced later. It's called carrying capacity. And something that we grapple with in New Jersey that's a common issue are called native species and invasive species. But sometimes just knowing what lives around us and what animals are doing every day to meet their basic needs. Why, when they see a bird flying overhead or when a deer runs in front of the car, when they're in class and looking out the window and they see something moving or there's an insect at the window. Usually these animals are on a mission and they're doing something to meet one of their basic needs. We have a variety of animals in the state. This is some of our smaller critters. These are all aquatic animals. We have just an array of aquatic animals that live along shorelines of waterways, at the bottom of waterways, in leaf litter, in waterways, and also along the shorelines and not necessarily in the water. We see things skirting along the surface and burrowing in the sand or living underneath the rocks. We have over 3,700 native wildlife species in the state. So many are microscopic and some are the size of the black bear. In New Jersey, just when we talk about aquatic critters, if you are interested in having students really learn about aquatic critters, how they differ, how their basic needs are being met, there are programs in the state specifically designed for classrooms. New Jersey has a group called Watershed Ambassadors. They will come to your school, and we'll have information posted for this webinar, but they come to your school. They will work with the class, take you outside to a local waterway, preferably something within walking distance. There are many schools that have an aquatic site on the school property or within walking distance, or it'll become a field trip, or they bring aquatic critters to your classroom. But that's one way of learning about it. And we also encourage schools to monitor, to adopt a waterway site, and to actually study the critters that live there 2 or 3 times during the school year. And there are many programs and people out there who can help you do that. Besides the Watershed Ambassadors, there are other trained professionals that can help you get trained to do this. Our state has a plethora of insects, all different sizes, shapes, some that can fly, some that can't. There's quite a few programs in New Jersey that also engage students in learning about insects, attracting and releasing butterflies, gardening on the school property, whether it's with flowers or vegetables. There are plants that you can put into those gardens that will attract various types of insects so you can study them. Even studying ants and bee populations is becoming popular with classrooms. We also, and many schools have been doing this for years, that there are places that you can buy equipment that you can observe insects and bugs, and you can purchase things as like nets and field guides. Yeah, there's all kinds of observation containers and hand lens, so that students can get a close-up look at different kinds of insects without needing to touch them necessarily, without hurting them in any way, and then they can be released after the kids get a good look at them. And it's just an awesome thing to do, especially if you have this type of habitat right outside your classroom door. We encourage you to start to use it if you want. And then we can't forget about birds. New Jersey is home to many species of birds, including songbirds, raptors, and ground-dwelling birds, birds who primarily spend most of their time on the ground, like a turkey or a pheasant. Notice just in this small array of photographs the differences in body size, coloration, body shape. And when kids take a good look at different birds, their beaks are different, their wingspans are different, their body sizes are different, they're designed differently. And so much of that is based on how they're adapted to meet their basic needs. There are different programs in the state that can help teach you how to have a bird feeding station right on your school property, so that you can attract birds and the kids can watch them right at school. There are also several live cams around the state where the cameras are focused on a nest, such as for a hawk or an eagle or an osprey. And as the birds are hatched and raised, people can watch them from the classroom, and it's really exciting. And there are usually lesson plans that are available for those types of activities. We didn't want to forget about the scaly, slimy, wet, and quiet creatures in New Jersey. We're home to many species of snakes, turtles, and salamanders that live in our wetlands, our salt marshes, coastline, and waterways. Older students can be trained to go out and help count frog species by their calls in the spring. That is actually a program in New Jersey that's becoming more popular. We also have a program in the state where you can get trout and raise them in the classroom and then release them in the spring. And it's called Trout in the Classroom. It's an awesome program. Then we have last but not least, we have a great variety of mammals, small and large, that exist in New Jersey, and these can fly, burrow, and swim and climb. There's just a great diversity of mammals just in this small array of photos. And I wanted to just state that many schools do get the proper permits to keep various types of wildlife in the classroom in captivity for educational purposes. And if they choose not to do that, and most choose not to do that, you can invite speakers in from nature centers and wildlife rehabilitators who bring in animals, largely birds and mammals like this, sometimes reptiles, and they can talk to you about you can learn about basic needs to them bringing in their live animals in and showing them to the kids. This is just a quick array of some of the materials and literature that we have at DEP resources. We call them supplemental resources. Some of these things I mentioned. We also have Project Wet, Project Wild, and Aquatic Wild. These are all curriculum supplements with dozens and dozens of lessons. And there will be information posted for this seminar on how you could learn how to go about getting these materials. The AmeriCorps program I mentioned, and we also have literature booklets for kids that can be mailed to you, and you can integrate it into your own lessons and studies that deal with water. Okay, we're switching gears now and talking about plants instead of animals, specifically on trees. There are two lessons, one from Project Learning Tree, which we sponsor. It's called Adopt a Tree, and there's a lesson in NatureScope called Get to Know a Tree. And I've always loved these activities. They're very simple, but basically you're going to have your students get to know a tree. In the course of them taking a science class from you, they're going to be also getting to know personally a tree on the property or within walking distance of the school. Again, it's place-based education, but they're going to be leaving the classroom and watching how that tree changes over time. We recommend that you do this activity with at least 3 seasonal visits, once in the fall while the leaves are still on the tree but changing, once in the winter when there's no leaves on the tree, and then once in the spring when new growth is coming. The things that you are going to have the kids, depending on the age group, I mean, everything on the screen is a kind of information, and you can see it's well-rounded. There's a lot of things that could be done, but they walk to their tree with you. They can work in small groups or with partners, and they will get to know that tree by name, by genus and species. With the younger kids, you can have them make up a name. One of our practices is it's less important to know exactly what these things are. It's more important to know what those things need and how their lives are meeting those needs, interact with humans, and what we do in our activities to meet our needs. That's more important. So we want them to draw the tree, to describe it, so it ties in with other subjects. When it relates to adaptations, they're going to be learning about tree parts and how those parts change over time. So the kids will be looking up at the canopy, they'll be looking at leaf litter on the ground, they're going to be looking at buds, they're going to be looking at bark, and they're going to be looking at root systems. They're also going to be looking at what lives around this tree. And like I said earlier, they may not see any wildlife, but over the course of time, they will find forms of wildlife. And you're going to have to remind the kids to get on their hands and knees, to touch and feel the bark and look closely in the grooves of the bark and to look up in the canopy. We always want to remind people about safety. If you're not comfortable taking kids outside, this is an easy lesson to do because trees are usually, hopefully you have at least one tree on the property and you can easily take the whole class out to adopt that one tree during your science class over the course of the year. But always, if you go out in advance and scout it out, you're going to be looking for poison ivy, hives, holes. These are things that may be in the area. Most of the time they're not, especially on property where the groundskeeper takes care of these things. But you learn what's out there and avoid it, or you learn how to set up some rules, kind of ground rules with the kids. And these are just a nice slide arrangement of various tree-related activities that are being conducted in different schools in New Jersey. You can see different types of equipment being used here. Equipment can be purchased, such as field guides, identification charts, hand lenses, bug boxes. You can measure the diameter of trees. You can measure the height of trees. Cameras are neat to have for doing this type of activity. And at the end of the year, you can have the kids write a poem about their tree. You can take a photograph of them with their tree. It becomes, in a way, a friend to them. They have a personal relationship with that tree. We encourage you to do bark rubbings, which many of us grew up doing, but it's a great activity to tie in with this. You can also invite a local forester or a horticulturalist in, or a landscaper, and you could talk to them about what their perspective is of trees and how trees work. This is a time of year, if you take your kids out this spring, it's a perfect time of year to start looking at how quickly buds open. In my busy life, I walk out the door, I don't see buds. I walk out the next day, I see buds. I walk out the next day, all of a sudden there's leaves. I mean, I feel like it's all happening overnight. It happens so quickly. But it's such a beautiful process to have kids really focus on. There's different trees do different things. We have great diversity in New Jersey of evergreens, which keep their needles all year, different species of evergreens, as well as hardwoods or deciduous trees, which are the trees that lose their leaves during the year. You should involve the kids with looking at the differences in bark. The inner workings of the tree, I'm not covering with this, but Project Learning Tree, one of our resources, has dozens of wonderful activities that talk about how trees grow, how trees find water, how trees use sunlight, and the basic needs of trees and how they grow. But basically with this slide here, I try to show the importance of tree parts. The canopy, the trunk itself, the bark, these are all for protection, the structure, and then the roots are very important for helping to sustain the tree in terms of nourishment and water. And then also what's equally important for the livelihood of trees are seeds and how it reproduces. And this is exciting to have kids collect different seeds and to learn about how different seeds are and how they travel and how they get from one place to another. So we do have a great array of evergreens and pine cones in the state, as well as different types of seeds and seed designs, such as acorns. And the other maples have the spiral helicopter type seed that so many of us may have in our yards. But these are all adaptations that tree has for water. And then in order to reproduce, I mean. And then lastly, there is an indicator, a performance measure in science standards that I wanted to touch on that talks about the impacts that plants have on our environment. Many of you, if you're a homeowner, you may have these things happening in your yard, and they can be sometimes very irritating. So we know we have leaf litter, and on the, we have some negatives and positives here. So trees shed their leaves, which is a beautiful thing, but it's work for the individual. Trees give us shade. There's so many benefits of trees, but they do. When dead, they fall. In a storm, they turn over. They're great for shoring down a shoreline, but and helping to retain soil and shoreline. But on the flip side, they can fall over easily if their roots are too exposed, and then it becomes a hazard. So there are definitely wonderful benefits that trees have on the land and on natural resources, but they also are there are destructive things when it comes to human activity. These are some resources that the ED has for tree and forestry education. I mentioned Project Learning Tree earlier. That's another curriculum supplement. We also sell the Tree ID Guide and Shrubs and Vines of New Jersey. Both of these are student-friendly. There's great illustrations in them for various tree parts for each species. These are common species that are found in New Jersey, and it's something worth looking into if you'd like a class set that you can use every year. There is a lot of free information online, too, that you can get from New Jersey or the Northeast region of the United States. There are many providers of tree ID information online. Okay, we're switching gears to finally pulling these things together. We focused indoors on learning about local wildlife, and then we focused outdoors about learning about trees. We talked about adaptations. We talked about basic needs, and we talked about habitat and how that is the kind of the compilation where different animals and plants are, because their basic needs are easily met there. Now here's another this is an activity where you take your students outside. They don't have to go far. This can in most cases happen on your school property, but you're going to find two areas that are very different from each other. These areas could include a field, grassy lawns, woods, hillsides, a park, playground, garden, could be a vegetable garden, a flower garden. It could also include a shoreline, like if you have a stream on the property. And it can include built buildings, or a built area can include pavement. So we're not looking for just natural areas. When students go to this area, one thing that you will talk about ahead of time is that they're going to be in this study. They're going to be looking at both living or biotic elements, which is plants and animals primarily, but they'll also be looking at the non-living or abiotic elements of that area. They're going to be looking at soil, water, air, and what's underground rock. When those things are also brought into play, those are the elements of an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community similar to our neighborhoods or our own communities, where different plants and animals interact with each other, and then they also interact with the chemical and physical factors that make up the non-living. So there are things that happen between soil and water, or the weather and water, or the weather and soil. So while nature and non-living things are interacting, those things do impact the animals and plants that live there. And it impacts sometimes how they have to go about meeting their needs. And all of this is, when kids are outside and you take them outside to study an ecosystem that's right on the school property, they're witnessing firsthand what life is like in that particular ecosystem. This is the information that they could learn about when they visit this place. And we encourage you to have them divide the class up into 2 groups and then set up small teams amongst each group so that different types of information can be gathered by the various groups. So they're all busy doing different things. So the physical data, but you're having the kids gather information about the location, having them write down a description of that particular place, drawings and photos of the site, and so on. And these are sites that you would mark off in some area, in some way. You can use construction tape, you can use cones. It could be as big as you're comfortable with. You can also, what's commonly used is a hula hoop, and you can have a group just focus on what they find within a hula hoop. So it's very flexible, but the key is to have 2 different areas, 2 different ecosystems, because there will be great differences. If you look at air temperature, wind speed, humidity, sunlight, the amount of sunlight in that area. Is there a slope in that area? What's, is it on a hill? Is it flat? Is any of it paved? And is there any sounds that can be heard while at the site? Usually there are. So have the kids write those down, describe them, and what they think are causing them. All that information, and also if they have some ideas about why it's that way, it should all be documented. And they should use their writing skills as well as drawing skills. And if they have a camera, that would come in handy as well. And then the other equipment that you have to measure what's listed here. What investigations they'll be doing: soil, plants, animals, water, the built environment. Some of this we already covered. They will find animal signs, and encourage them to get on their hands and knees, get their hands dirty, look up top, look high, look low, look close. There will be, if there are plants, hopefully there's more than 1 species. Have them draw and count how many of each they find. Chances are they won't see animals. They might find some insects. They may see some birds, but hopefully they'll find signs. Are there things that are chewed? Are there any tracks? Are there any webs? Are there any nests? And then at the same, if you have an aquatic site, have them do the same type of exploration. And if you live in a built environment, if your school is in a built environment, all of this is very productive if it's on pavement or along a building. There will be evidence of nature, plants and animals there, and there will be physical data that can be collected. We have some copy pages here that will be posted online. This one is from NatureScope publication. That's from the National Wildlife Federation. There's a lot more assistance online for gathering information if you choose to use several of these or make up your own worksheets. This is one that's out there. Also, we'll have these posted at the website as a resource. This is for just focusing on insects at that particular site. I had dug up, I put 1 shovelful in the ground behind my house and brought it to work just to see what kind of diversity came out of 1 shovelful. So we were able to quickly separate out some plants that were already growing. We found 3 different types of leaves, so 3 different tree species were here. We found a couple different types of fungus and 3 different types of tree seed or nut. So and a vine. So they're in 1 shovelful, quasi-wooded area. There was some great diversity. On the flip side, if you are not comfortable taking your group outside to do this, we encourage you to start collecting on your own and having bringing the outdoors in. And many teachers do this, and it's something that we do when we go into classrooms if we don't have time to take the kids out. The stuff on the left is just a collection of things that you can take into the classroom and include in your discussion. Many of these things are found naturally on the property, in different ecosystems, when you're out wandering in a park, when you're in your own backyard. And then we just store them in plastic bags, and you can use these things over and over again for years. And it's something that you may want to consider doing, or if you don't already, or it's something that you can do if it's raining outside and you can't bring the kids out. We just wanted to encourage you also to consider, if you are interested in bringing your kids outside on a regular basis. If you use the same sites over and over again, we actually call that an outdoor classroom, or we call that an outdoor laboratory, a living laboratory. It's actually becoming, for you, an extended classroom. There are many schools in this state, hundreds, that have outdoor classrooms that they have actually raised money, received grants, received donations to put native plants back into the area, to incorporate plants and trees that encourage wildlife to actually come to the school property. There are actually schools who have raised money to put ponds in where they haven't had them before. So on a grander scale, you can create an outdoor classroom on your property. All of these activities are helping to develop in students, while accomplishing what you need to accomplish in the next generation of science standards. You're helping the kids become aware of what lives around them. And hopefully you're developing in them an appreciation of what lives around them, so that they can become stewards of that environment in their communities. We hope that in the long run, that as kids get older, as their more complex thinking takes place and they have to face more sophisticated, complex issues, whether it's in the classroom or at home or in their day-to-day life, they'll remember that the environment is very intertwined, that what animals need, what plants need, and what humans need are all the same. We're not separate from their environment. They're not separate from ours. And as they make decisions as future homeowners or as future business owners, and if they own a business property, when they buy things, whether it's a type of vehicle or other items, they will take into account the effect that they're going to have on those living things. And that's what we hope will happen from this when it comes to becoming ecologically literate. This website on the left, Seeds, is a website sponsored by DEP. It has over 300 resources in it that are appropriate for classroom settings. There are several websites on this last slide that are administered by DEP. We have a lot of information available, much of which will supplement what we discussed today during this seminar. We do have a limited amount of expertise that can help you in the areas of forestry, fish and wildlife, and water resources, depending on what you'd like to do on your property. So I hope that I'll close with this one final quote that I love, that hopefully for you sums up everything we've covered in this last hour. Every community is a learning laboratory, and all of it is places, processes, and products or resources for learning. So before we end this day, I just wanted to thank everybody for hanging in there. And before you go out and hopefully get outside, does anyone have any questions? You can type your questions in if you have any. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon. And Mark Rogoff and I are always findable at DEP, and if you have any questions, we're there to serve New Jersey teachers. So I hope that we talk to you some other time soon. Bye-bye.